Hey y'all, so there was a question about how do you make font look like a gradient. So I'm going to show you that really quickly right here. It's pretty easy. Um, we'll take a picture in Photoshop, and what we want to make it look like is this. So we have this kind of Stanford red to black gradient. That's what that's called when it changes from one color to the next. So we're going to use this picture right here. It's just a picture so that we can put something there. And we're going to call it leaves. Okay, so I've used a text layer. I used the quick button T there, or you can click over on your horizontal text tool. I'm also going to make it all capitals, so it looks kind of nice there. It's tough to find the exact font, you know, if you're looking at this one. This actual font with the kind of like angular S, that might be fairly logo driven. It could even have a copyright, so you might not be able to find that. What I did is I found a text that's at least somewhat achieving the same look with a bold, kind of straight looking letter. So now there's a couple things. If I look at this font on the Stanford, I noticed a couple things. Number one, it has a drop shadow. We can easily add a drop shadow, so we'll do that in a second. It also has a stroke around it, and a stroke's really easy to put on there. And finally, again, what we started this demo with is it has a gradient on the letters. So let me show you first how that's done, then we'll add our stroke. So you can see here it's just a solid red because that was my foreground color. So make sure you select whatever you want the gradient to be as not only the foreground but the background on those chips. My background's going to be black because I want that to fade from red to black. Then it's pretty easy. All you do is when it's selected on the layer under leaves, I'm going to go down to FX, and then I have all these options, right? So I'm going to do gradient overlay. Now I've already set this up, so it did it automatically, but yours probably won't be automatic. There's a couple things that you need to change also. So up here you want to keep your blend mode as normal. Just keep that normal. Opacity, you can make it full. You can say 100%. You could drop that down, again, depending on what you want that to look like. I'm going to put mine at about 69, 70, somewhere in there. Then the gradient is where you select the color. Notice I can do a whole bunch of different choices here. It gives you all these presets. It should, if you have your background and foreground set, it should give you one that's set up right away on the first one. You can also, of course, rename those gradients. You can change those gradients. You can work through that. If you double click it, it allows you to kind of move that gradient around depending on how dark you want it or light you want it. Again, that's just by double clicking the actual color there. And then you can actually change those colors. But the main one you want is, or the main thing you want to do is make sure you set those chips, and it should be pretty easy. Then, of course, we can actually change the angle of our gradient. And notice it goes through kind of all the letters there. But based on Catherine's example, I'm going to leave it like this. And I'm going to make sure this reverse one is clicked because I want it to look as similar to that Stanford font as possible. Then it's looking good to me, so I'm going to say that looks pretty good. But instead of just saying OK and leaving this, I'm going to also add a couple other things. Because what you notice is it doesn't have the stroke and it doesn't have the drop shadow. That might also change how I make the gradient. So let's go to the stroke right now. And right now, if we used this stroke, notice it's a black stroke. And that's not what that poster had. It had a white stroke. So we want to go up here, right down to color, click color. And then we're going to choose white here and say OK. All right, now it has that kind of dynamic white look around the color. I like how that's looking. I could drop the opacity a little bit because this is kind of intense. So I'm going to drop that down. And it's on the outside, which I like. I could make it a little bit thinner, maybe. There we go. Right about there, 13. And then the last thing I'm going to do is put in a drop shadow, because they also had a drop shadow. Now notice this one dropped kind of behind it. Theirs looked like it was not so much to the side. It looked like it was really right behind it. And that's going to be affected by these sliders right here. So my distance, I'm going to just move that up right behind it, And I'm actually going to increase the spread and the size just a little bit because it looked like theirs was kind of right behind it. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to look over at this one. Theirs is, of course, tilted. It's more italicized. If I want to do that with this font, I'm not sure if I can. But up here, yep, it doesn't give me that option. But up here, it does have that, you know, this drop down would have italicized if you could do it. Now, what I can do is, with all that highlighted, I could go through and look for other fonts as well. Okay, so just by highlighting the letters and then highlighting, ultimately, your font, you can actually choose different styles. This is a little bit more cartoony, but it does give me an italic option. So maybe you think that looks closer. Nevertheless, this is pretty close, I'd say, in color, if not in actual font. So that's kind of the goal here that we tried. We wanted to make it look as much like this as possible. And so I think we've achieved that. Again, if you wanted to get the similar look with the white gradient, it's essentially the same process. You're putting a gradient over that font in the same pattern, but in there you'd use white and black. So that's about it. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions or anything, of course, contact me.